To mix it up, why don't you do the intro, Davis?
We recording?
Yep.
Hello and welcome to Davis and the Jake Man.
You already messed it up, Davis.
Yep.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Davis and the Jake Man, a monthly podcast hosted by two certified computer technicians. This month's edition of the podcast, we'll be discussing the tech news for the month of November.
Alrighty, so you wanted to talk about Microsoft Edge coming to mobile, finally.
Yeah, but before we officially get into the tech news, there's a big piece. I might write about this for the site, so depending on how quickly I upload the edited version of this recording, this might be like a sneak peek into what's to come in the written word on d&thejm. So yeah, this is like, one of the companies I've covered the most over the past 2 years. By the way, for anyone who cares, December 6th officially marks the 2-year anniversary of davisandthejakeman.com. And since then, I've been covering Microsoft at length, and specifically Windows Phone before a tweet killed it. And one of the arguments I made for Windows Phone popularity to increase and its adoption rate to grow would be if they had a mobile equivalent of the Microsoft Edge browser. This is yet another one of those stories of too little too late. It's just now been released for Android and iOS. It's the bookmark syncing works great. You can, all the stuff I talked about on last month's podcast, actually, when we were discussing Firefox and how useful the feature to be able to start on one device and finish on the other, that works on Edge just fine. Like, for example...
Yeah, was it Continuum?
Yeah, that's like a Microsoft-specific term, but as like a more general concept. Like, all of the other browsers already supported this. Apple Safari, Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome. But out of the box, even with like... I think it's in beta, as a matter of fact, because I needed to be emailed a link to the App Store. So that leads me to believe it is in beta. Syncing does work. I haven't tried it on Android. Actually, probably going to implore you, Davis, to try it out this coming month and then report back to us in January. But on the iOS side, it works great on the iPhone. It's actually not coded for the iPad. So it's one of these like blown up phone apps. Like here, I'll show you it actually. It looks pretty gross. That's how it looks natively.
Oh, that's terrible.
Or 2 times, and then it's all blown up and like aliased AF. So yeah, it looks bad. On the phone, it looks perfect though. It's just a matter of there's more screen resolution on the iPad versus the iPhone. Yeah. Which, considering it's a larger screen device, makes perfect sense.
Too many pixels.
Yeah, there's only like 10 different devices in the iOS ecosystem. It isn't hard to target them all. So I'd be curious to see, you still own some Android tablets, right?
Yeah, I have both my, my Kindle Fire, which
doesn't have access to the Play Store officially.
But I jailbroke that thing in a week. Then there is, I believe I still have the Galaxy tablet somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, Davis, your assignment, if you choose to accept it, is to try Edge both on your phone and on that Galaxy tablet.
Alrighty. Should I find either of those devices?
Well, one of them's in your pocket, right?
I guess.
Report back to us on Edge on Android, but on iOS, it's great on the phone, bad on the tablet. Syncing works as it should. I'm really interested to learn about how the rendering engine is on Android, because on iOS it's locked down to Apple WebKit 2. Which path they choose will be very interesting, because for me, I think they're prioritizing ease of use over Edge HTML. Like, they aren't marketing Edge HTML.
Right.
As I've written about for the site, it's guaranteed to be 100% WebKit compliant. So it's just they're building a few features on top of WebKit. They're not forking it. It's sort of like a WebKit plus, in a sense. Yeah, so that's Edge more or less. It's just like, if this had come like 2 years earlier, it would be very exciting. But it's just like, it's almost like, why did they even bother now?
Yeah, there's so many mobile browsers that already have their largest shares of the market. I mean, I use Chrome most of the time, occasionally Firefox for Pocket. You're iOS, so you probably use Safari.
No. I was trying to get this across to you before we even started the podcast. I don't know if I articulated it very well. Even though you can't change default apps in iOS, there's a workaround. and it's within the Apple guidelines, so your app won't get taken down for it. You can direct apps to open other apps. So, like, for example, if you're in Chrome and you click a link, it'll kick you into the Gmail app, not iOS Mail.
Right.
And I have configured Outlook to open Firefox and Firefox to open Outlook.
Set up an infinite loop there.
That's right. I don't have to deal with Safari. I uninstalled Safari and Mail because they both suck.
I should send you an email with a link to another link and see what happens. A link to an email with a link.
You're trying to turn me into a node for your botnet?
Potentially. So let's see. Next up, we've got the in-display fingerprint sensors coming next year.
Yeah, this is an article I just wrote for our site last night and published this morning. So why don't I pull that up now? So it's one of my shorter articles here. I don't have like I'm not like preaching to the reader like I do a lot. I'm not like evangelizing some sort of tech here. I'm just explaining why this is important. And basically it's Synaptics, which we all hate because they make crappy trackpads. It's like, if you buy like a cheapo Windows laptop, it has a Synaptics touch-enabled trackpad, and they all like suck. If you need to spend like $1,000 to get what they call a Windows Precision trackpad, which just means a good trackpad. A good trackpad isn't that hard to come by. I mean, your cheap Chromebook there has the trackpad's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it beats a Synaptics trackpad.
It does.
That's part of why my article is so short, actually, is because it's hard to be excited about a technology developed by Synaptics who can't even make a good trackpad. But they claim to have developed a technology which enables fingerprint sensors behind the display, which is very promising. It's like, the way I describe it in my article is it's like the holy grail of smartphone design. It's like you want to marry this idea of the bezel-less phone, but then the downside is, where do you put the fingerprint sensor?
Right. We found a couple answers. I mean, the most popular one is like right in the middle of the back of your phone. There was the Touch ID sensors on the front of the phone on the home button for the iPhones.
Right, as well as I mentioned in the article, the Samsung Galaxy phones for several years sort of aped that feature from Apple.
Right, and then there was an unfortunate phone, the name slips my mind, that had the fingerprint sensor next to the camera. You could potentially either fingerprint or scratch your camera.
Yeah, and then their Note 8, their $1,000 smartphone, had the same poor design choice. And it has a smaller battery than the smaller phone.
Maybe it's not really a sensor. Maybe they're just taking a picture of your fingerprint, like most sensors do.
Well, I mean, anytime South Korea comes up in our articles or our tech news, it's not good. So I wouldn't necessarily want Samsung to have pictures of my fingerprint. Because didn't the South Korean firm get blackmailed?
I think so.
Chris Ward, you wrote an article about that, actually. It's not from this past month. It's like months ago. It's like happened over the summer, I think. There was some like ransomware is the term.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the South Korean firm got hit with ransomware, and they actually paid up.
Yep.
So, like, if that's sort of the standard for tech firms in South Korea, then, my fingerprints will stay as far away from Samsung as humanly possible. But on the phones, biometric data is stored in a TPM, so theoretically it should be fine. The same holds true for Synaptics. They actually claim to have, in addition to develop the sensor itself, developed some anti-spoofing methods, which sounds promising. Like, so you can, for example, use a picture of a fingerprint, or place the fingerprint onto a false thumb and then try to authenticate with the false thumb. Yeah. But like all of the other phones already do this, so the Synaptics is just playing catch up. But it adds a layer of complexity because they can have up to 1 millimeter of glass between the thumb and the scanner, which is quite a bit more distance than the rear-facing or front-facing sensors we were just talking about.
Right, and then I also worry about the accuracy of the sensor once you naturally get like a piece of plastic or a piece of glass to put on your actual phone screen.
Yeah, depending on the thickness of the protector, that might go above that threshold.
Yeah.
Especially like, those OtterBox cases with the very thick plastic. I think that would definitely be the death knell for these Synaptics in-display sensors.
Yeah, just because unless they can get a sensor that can pass through at least 2 or 3 millimeters of glass, it's going to be much more difficult to get an accurate read. I mean, it might just be a feature that users will have to choose to give up should they need a case, and most people should get a case for their phone. Alrighty. All right, so next let's talk about the tech news for October 31st through November 6th.
Yeah, this is the last of Jake Mann's tech news before Davis came back from his semi-hiatus. And
I'm still on hiatus, thank you. So first up was the Xbox One X being in stores on November 7th. But yeah, Xbox One X has a tagline as the most powerful console, enabling true 4K gaming. But yeah, I mean, back then, and probably still actually, the Xbox One pre-orders are pretty much sold out.
It's proven to be a popular console. There's been a huge marketing campaign behind it. You'll see banner ads on most websites. It's also been covered by nearly every prominent YouTube channel, even ones that only discuss like culture, even the non-tech ones. Will be like, Microsoft reached out to me and wanted to sponsor this video, so here's this video. And it's like, of course they're not going to say the Xbox One sucks, whether it does or not, because it's a sponsored video.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a conflict of interest there. I'm kind of glad that the EU mandates that these channels disclose that it's sponsored content. It's just one of those things where it would be, I feel the temptation would be too great for these folks, these aspiring stars. They just, a good portion of them would just sell out.
Yeah. I mean, it's natural, especially for the up-and-coming people. Free clicks and free views help out.
Right, and if they have exclusive access to the console a week before it drops, then that's going to garner a lot of comments and views. But back onto the console itself, for $500, it is pretty powerful. There was a talking point I'm actually borrowing from, by coincidence, a YouTube channel, that Linus Tech Tips channel.
Yep.
He was talking about how without a variable refresh rate, the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X don't have the same potential as a similarly spec'd PC, and I think that's a great point. First of all, the FPS are capped at 60. Then if they can't handle 60 at 4K, then they're gonna drop the res down.
Right, but that's a better alternative than dropping the frame rate.
But it's always good to have that choice. I mean, there's a minority of people who would, they have a 4K television just on principle alone. They'd rather drop the FPS than not get 4K. Like, they paid for this 4K console, they paid for this 4K panel, they want to get the most out of it.
Right.
Which is fair. The thing is, since it's capped at 60, there are televisions with 120, 240 frames per second. Especially if you connect the Xbox to a computer monitor. Like, I have a panel with 144. I wouldn't be able to get half of that if I hooked an Xbox up.
Besides the fact that it's 4K, it's basically the same console as the Xbox One S. Higher specs, dedicated to the 4K. You're still going to be able to play all the same games, the same apps.
Yeah, it's just the APU is OC'd, and you've got 1.5 times the RAM.
Right. I mean, one thing that always makes me nervous with these mid-generation upgrades is what actually had happened with the 3DS. I had actually picked one up fairly early in the console's life cycle. I bought it used. And there was just a few games that I couldn't play because they required the new 3DS with a better processor. I think there was Xenoblade Chronicles. I think there was one or two Nintendo first-party games that I wouldn't be able to play without investing in a new console.
I'm trying to find an article that I wrote for the site a long time back. It actually has to do with exactly what we're talking about. See, the longer we have this site, the more we will be able to look back. All right, this is one from August 2016. It's mid-cycle upgrades represent the best and worst of planned obsolescence. Subtitle, the staggering rate of innovation is bittersweet. And I talk about the 1S here. I'm not going to discuss the entire article, but it's been a problem for a while, and it's one of those things where it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Right. And one thing that I find is ironic is that the consoles have sort of moved closer to that PC upgrade cycle market. It's not like we can swap out Xbox One parts yet besides the hard drive, controllers, etc. But it's kind of funny that now we might soon have to start worrying about, which Xbox One logo is on the case. Oh yeah, there was the T-Mobile and Sprint merger back in November. Well, they almost merged specifically. And it's a good thing they didn't because, I mean, we've got so many powerhouses in so many industries right now that competition is just a non-factor.
Yeah, I mean, there are only 4 big players, and all of these other carriers are just MVNOs, mobile virtual network operators. They work off the existing networks, like Metro PCS is T-Mobile, Boost is Sprint, etc. I think TracFone actually works off of all 4, which is weird, but not at the same time. So it's like you got to pick like which subsidiary of TracFone.
Yeah, because I mean, they couldn't find terms that they could agree on. They also probably had some of our watchdogs hounding the door.
Also, like if you got to share a store with Radio Shack, then you're not that viable.
Yeah, and Radio Shack is pretty much dead. I think I forget who bought them out.
Yeah, they declared bankruptcy and they got bought out. The stores are gonna stay open, I think.
Yeah. I mean, both companies have left the door open for other mergers. So, who knows? We might have the 1 or the 2 phone companies soon enough, but it's just, these monopolies and duopolies are getting a little out of hand.
Hopefully the Department of Justice or the Federal Trade Commission would, step in if it came down to it.
Yeah. That's their job.
All right, now time to move on to Davis's Tech News, November 7th through the 15th.
Alrighty. CIA impersonates Kaspersky.
Yes, comrade.
But yeah, there was a leak there was actually a source code leak of some of CIA stuff where they were trying to impersonate Kaspersky programs. And this came out as a result of another WikiLeaks, Vault 8. Can't believe we're already up to Vault 8, but yeah.
If you inspect the source code for d&thejm.com, in the comments portion of the HTML is just swag. Shouldn't affect the page load times or anything.
Now, fake certificates have been a big deal in the last couple of years. They're used plenty in phishing attacks. There's been a lot of movement with the Let's Encrypt movement, where more and more websites were able to get free certificates for encrypting the web. Especially, even potentially a website like ours. I'm not sure whether we actually have HTTPS enabled.
No. So
get on that.
The NSA knows that you're reading that sweet tech news, but you should be behind a firewall and a proxy anyway. So
a firewall on 7 proxies,
yeah.
as the kids say.
Okay, well, you are the official youth correspondent starting now. You're the
hey kids, is that proxy lit?
Oh, this firewall's Fleek AF. Okay, and for the 1/3 of you who didn't stop listening, next up, Tech News, November 14th through the 20th.
All right, next up, Facebook is evil.
No way. Facebook is evil?
Well, let's try and find the specific article, because that's way too broad for me to know what the heck I was talking about.
But no, the actual article itself is Facebook's ex-president says that the company he worked for exploited vulnerabilities in human psychology.
Right. There a couple of years ago, it was published research that they were changing people's feeds to try and influence their moods. If you saw a depressing Facebook post, you'd have a darker worldview. If you saw positive posts like your friends getting married, things like that, you'd probably still have a darker worldview, but
it won't be related to social media, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
You can use Facebook for almost anything at this point. You can, if you're on Facebook, you can find links to shopping. You can find links to all the games, instant messaging. So next up was the fellas at the freaking FCC. All right, so the original article was the FCC explaining why public support for net neutrality won't stop the repeal.
Boring. Developed with the
Yeah,
freaking FCC. Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, you can submit a complaint to the FCC, but it's up to them whether or not they act on it.
Yeah,
And they're not going to. And Ajit Pai has said it as much. He's openly admitted that he's not going to take concerns from the public under consideration. He's already made up his mind.
Yeah, because Verizon paid him so much.
Yeah, there you go.
Alrighty then. So let's move on to the November 28th through December 5th edition of the Tech News. British iPhone owners sue Google.
Yeah, that's the class action lawsuit. Let's see. All right, the original article was posted on Bloomberg on November 30th. The headline being, Google sued over privacy on behalf of 5 million iPhone users. And so this class action...
Want to buy an Android device? Hey, you want to switch your default search to Google?
But yeah, the group called Google You Owe Us is filing this against Alphabet, the parent company of Google, saying that they unlawfully collected personal information about people accessing Google services on their iPhone. So like this is another example of sort of where the America is benefiting from the more stringent laws that the EU has. So like it's like a trickle down effect almost. Like we don't have these laws on the books, but because the EU does, and these are multinational corporations, like we might see some benefit from it. If this group beats Google in court, then they would have to start enacting best practices, and then they're going to do that abroad. Hopefully. This podcast is accompanied by our website, davidandthejm.com, where we continue the discussion of subjects of note in the IT industry.
And also Facebook.
And also Facebook, which is evil.
It's okay because the exec said it.
Even though it's ripping society itself apart.
Okay, hashtag horse, hashtag battery, hashtag staple.
Hashtag antitrust.
Yep. All right, that's Jake's identity right there.
Oh no.